I want to get to this post on Truth Social by President Trump here. He said, we, quote, had a very meaningful meeting in the White House today. Much was learned that could never be understood without conversation under such fire and pressure. It's amazing what comes out through emotion. And I have determined that President Zelenskyy is not ready for peace if America is involved because he feels our involvement gives him a big advantage in negotiations. I don't want advantage. I want peace. He disrespected the United States of America in its cherished Oval Office. He can come back when he is ready for peace. All right, I want to bring in CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Major Garrett. That post on Truth Social coming down just moments ago. Major, first, give me your reaction to what you just saw in the Oval Office. And do you have any indication that President Zelenskyy is even still there at the White House?
I'm not there at the White House, so I can't offer any perspective on that. And in the intervening moments since the Oval Office fracas between President Trump and President Zelenskyy, I thought two thoughts. One, a lot of that could be rhetorical show in preparation for the United States and Ukraine still finalizing a deal on U.S. access to rare earth minerals in Ukraine and the implied security that comes with it, which the Trump administration often underscores. Or I thought something else could happen. There could be no negotiated deal, no press conference, Zelenskyy could leave, and the president could send him on his way to come back groveling at some point in the future. That social media post you just read suggests that's where we are. It's still possible that after that social media post, Zelenskyy and Trump find a way to hammer out this agreement, still have a press conference, and patch this up by the end of the day. But the chances of that appear vanishingly thin at this hour. I've covered candidate Trump, candidate Trump, now President Trump again for a decade. Sometimes what happens in public is exactly what he wants to happen and exactly what he's thinking and no more. Sometimes what he demonstrates in public is a rhetorical flourish in order to prepare himself and possibly the country for something else. I was thinking as I was watching this historic, unprecedented exchange of emotion in the Oval Office that perhaps President Trump knew that they would still reach a deal, that the rare earth mineral conversation would reach a conclusion, and that he would have some difficulty selling that to the hardest MAGA parts of his base. So he wanted a confrontation so he could say, I stood up for America, but I did the deal. The United States is still looking out for itself, but it's also looking out for Ukraine. But I wanted to put the Ukrainian president through the ringer a little bit in public before I got there. I still think that's possible, but that social media post makes it seem much more difficult to get there. And to the points that have been expressed by others about Vladimir Putin and Russia, the Russians take very close notes on American rhetoric. And the rhetoric today is almost entirely on the side of Moscow and Vladimir Putin, saying that when Vladimir Zelenskyy brings people from America to Ukraine to see the devastation of the war launched by Russia, in the words of the Vice President J.D. Vance, that's a propaganda tour. President Trump saying, we empowered you to be a tough guy, but you don't seem to want to be a tough guy. And if you don't deal with us on our terms, we're out. Also suggesting an appearance in the fall that President Zelenskyy made in Scranton, Pennsylvania, which was to thank workers there at an armaments factory for sending weapons to Ukraine so they could defend themselves, was somehow a political gift to President Biden and Kamala Harris running against then candidate Trump. All of that fits into the kind of propaganda that Russians have been injecting via social media into the American MAGA media space for months and months and months. And in the Oval Office, to see that rhetoric that very much sides with Russia expressed not just by the president but by the vice president has to give Moscow, Vladimir Putin, and everyone around him encouragement. As I said, it is still possible this deal could be put together. But that social media post from the president moments ago suggests that that is a much less real prospect than it was this morning, just a few hours ago.
And Major, earlier this week, we saw President Trump meet with French President Emmanuel Macron, and then we saw him meet with the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer. And those are leading up to this meeting with Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Do you think, in your expertise, that this very contentious meeting is going to have an impact on the relationships with those two countries that we just met with?
If everything falls apart, yes, because the imperative for the French president and the British prime minister was to reinforce America's commitment to Ukraine, understand that the French and the British and maybe others in Europe are willing to put peacekeepers in there, provided there is a ceasefire and an end of hostilities that has real teeth, that gets Russia out and puts protections in for Ukraine. Those were the kind of things the Europeans and the French and the British leaders were coming to the White House to underscore. And in public, in all their conversations, President Trump appeared to be on board. The way to make that more concrete, more legible for Russia to see and for the Ukrainians to see would be to get this rare earth mineral deal signed and the implied security that comes with it. Because as the Trump administration often says, if the United States is committed financially to Ukraine's future, that implies and tells Russia, don't mess with us because we're going to be there. And we're aligned economically with Ukraine, and that's a red line for Russia. So don't cross us. That's the way the Trump administration has talked about this, both publicly and privately. But if that deal falls apart, and basically Trump says, Zelenskyy, get out of the White House and don't come back until you're ready for peace, and implied in that is to grovel on my terms, then that works very much to Russia's short-term interests.
Major Garrett, thank you so much from our CBS News headquarters there in Washington.